Lisa Hartwell, a 33-year-old marketing coordinator, was about to have her morning run turn into a nightmare encounter. It happened on October 7th, 2016. I remember reading the initial reports and just feeling a deep chill. The affluent Boulder, Colorado neighborhood of Wildwood Heights was still wrapped in the quiet darkness of early morning. This upscale residential development, built just 5 years earlier on the edge of the Rocky Mountain foothills, featured winding streets lined with modern homes that backed up against natural open space and wildlife corridors. Lisa had moved to Wildwood Heights 2 years earlier, drawn by the community's promise of mountain living with urban conveniences. She was a dedicated fitness enthusiast who maintained a strict exercise schedule despite her demanding career, often rising before dawn to complete her 5-mile run before heading to the office. Lisa's morning routine had become sacred to her, a peaceful time when she could clear her mind while enjoying the crisp mountain air and stunning views of the Front Range. The neighborhood had been experiencing an unusually dry autumn, with drought conditions extending well into what should have been the wet season. Local wildlife officials had issued warnings about increased animal activity in residential areas, as deer, elk, and their predators were being forced to venture closer to human settlements in search of water sources. Several residents had reported mountain lion sightings over the past month, including tracks found in backyards and a large cat spotted near the community's retention pond. Lisa had heard about the wildlife warnings, but dismissed them as typical Colorado mountain living concerns. She continued her early morning runs without altering her route or carrying any deterrents, confident that her familiar neighborhood streets were safe. Mountain lions, also known as cougars or pumas, are North America's second-largest wildcat species. Adult males weigh between 115 and 220 pounds. These powerful predators are perfectly adapted for hunting in mountainous terrain, possessing incredible stealth, speed, and jumping ability that allows them to leap vertically up to 15 feet and horizontally up to 45 feet. Mountain lions are primarily ambush hunters that rely on surprise attacks, typically targeting the neck and spine of their prey to deliver quick, fatal bites. As Lisa jogged through the pre-dawn darkness, she was completely unaware that a 140-pound male mountain lion had been stalking a mule deer through the drainage culvert that ran beneath the street she was approaching. Lisa's approach disrupted the carefully planned hunt, startling both the deer and the mountain lion. The deer bolted across the street and disappeared into the darkness, leaving the frustrated predator crouched in the shadows of the concrete drainage opening. The attack came without warning as Lisa passed within 10 feet of the drainage culvert. The 140-pound mountain lion exploded from the shadows with incredible speed, covering the distance between them in a single powerful leap. His massive front paws struck Lisa between the shoulder blades with devastating force, sending her crashing face first onto the asphalt street while his weight drove her to the ground. Lisa's attempts to scream were cut short as the mountain lion's powerful jaws clamped down on the back of her neck, his 4-inch canine teeth puncturing through muscle and vertebrae with crushing force. The mountain lion's razor-sharp claws raked across Lisa's back and shoulders, each swipe opening deep gashes that severed major blood vessels and caused massive tissue damage. The 140-pound cat used his incredible strength to pull Lisa's body across the asphalt and down into the concrete culvert, where the darkness and confined space would provide protection while he fed. Lisa's body was recovered 3 hours later by a joint team of police officers and Colorado Parks and Wildlife personnel. The mountain lion had abandoned his kill when the search teams approached, retreating further into the drainage network that connected to the natural creek system beyond the neighborhood. Lisa had died from massive trauma to her neck and spine, with the mountain lion's killing bite proving instantly fatal. The investigation revealed that Lisa had been jogging along her usual route when she inadvertently interrupted the mountain lion's hunt, triggering the attack that cost her life. The mountain lion was tracked and euthanized the following day after being located in the foothills above the neighborhood. It was August 19, 2017. When Felicity Grant arrived at Boulder County Open Space in Colorado, a vast wilderness area known for its rugged terrain and diverse wildlife population. The mountainous region stretched across thousands of acres of dense forest and winding trails that attracted outdoor enthusiasts. However, these same wilderness areas also served as prime habitat for mountain lions and other dangerous predators. Felicity Grant, a 39-year-old fitness influencer from Denver with over 5,000 social media followers, had planned what she called her ultimate wilderness transformation experience. Known for her entitled attitude and belief that her athletic superiority made her exempt from rules, she had already caused multiple confrontations at the park entrance. Her demanding personality became evident when she berated the teenage park attendant for suggesting she read safety guidelines, claiming someone of her fitness level didn't need advice from minimum wage employees. Park Ranger Tom Bradley had attempted to brief Felicity on recent mountain lion activity during her permit application process. The area had experienced multiple cougar sightings over the previous month, including aggressive encounters that resulted in temporary trail close. Felicity became increasingly hostile, interrupting Tom repeatedly. "I've often wondered about the line between confidence and arrogance, especially when it comes to the natural world. Mountain lions, for example, are apex predators, perfectly designed for their environment. Adult males can weigh up to 180 pounds and leap 40 feet in a single bound. Their claws, nearly 4 inches long, grip with lethal precision, and their canine teeth are perfectly placed to sever the spinal cord with one bite." Felicity, a runner, learned about this the hard way. She was a woman who believed her fitness made her invulnerable. She'd even torn down warning signs on the Rabbit Ears Pass Trail, insisting taxpayers like her had every right to use public trails. Fellow hikers tried to warn her about solo hiking at dawn. She dismissed them, cruelly suggesting they were just jealous of her superior athleticism. But it wasn't her athleticism that would be tested that day. Felicity began her solo run at 5:30 a.m., deliberately choosing the pre-dawn hours to avoid other hikers. She wore noise-cancelling headphones, blasting electronic music, and carried raw steaks in her backpack for a post-workout meal. The combination of her erratic movements, heavy breathing, and the scent of fresh meat created the perfect storm to attract a hunting mountain lion. A 140-pound male mountain lion had been actively hunting in the area, establishing a territory that included the Rabbit Ears Pass Trail. The predator detected the scent of fresh meat from over a mile away and began tracking her. The cougar stalked Felicity along the ridge above the trail, using rocks and trees to remain hidden. As she rounded a sharp bend, the mountain lion positioned itself on a large boulder about 15 feet above the path. Unaware, lost in her music and arrogance, Felicity passed below. The mountain lion launched itself in a devastating aerial attack. The predator struck Felicity from behind with tremendous force. His claws raked down her back. His front paws wrapped around her shoulders and neck. His teeth found their target, clamping down on the back of her neck with surgical precision, severing the connection between her brain and body instantly. The bite penetrated deep, fracturing vertebrae. Paralysis was immediate. The cougar maintained his grip, his claws tearing, opening deep wounds. Within minutes, Felicity was gone, a combination of spinal cord severance, blood loss, and suffocation. The mountain lion then dragged her body off the trail to feed. 3 days later, a search and rescue team found her remains. It was December 3rd, 2014. Fluorescent lights hummed over the kennels at the county animal shelter. Jennifer Walsh, a 25-year-old veterinary student, walked with a determined stride. She believed every animal deserved a second chance. As a weekend volunteer, Jennifer had a reputation for advocating for the shelter's most difficult cases, the ones marked with red cards indicating immediate euthanization. The dog that would cost Jennifer her life was Diesel, a 75-pound pit bull with a scarred muzzle and eyes that seemed to hold years of rage. He'd been surrendered after multiple bite incidents, including a severe attack on a neighbor's child. The behavioral assessment was clear: too dangerous for adoption. Scheduled for euthanization, Jennifer had been watching Diesel, looking for signs of the gentle soul she believed existed beneath his aggressive exterior. She'd seen him pace, growl, and destroy every toy. But she'd also seen moments of what she interpreted as vulnerability, brief softening when he thought no one was watching. The shelter's protocol was clear. Dogs like Diesel were never to be handled alone. Experienced staff with proper equipment were required for any interaction. But Jennifer had convinced herself that Diesel's aggression was fear-based, that he needed one-on-one attention. On that December afternoon, with most staff busy, Jennifer made the decision that would cost her her life. She approached Diesel. "I keep thinking about Jennifer, the young woman who dreamed of saving animals. But it was a dream that ended in a small, windowless room. A room where good intentions collided with raw, untamed instinct." Her story is a chilling reminder that sometimes our love for animals can blind us to the very real dangers they pose. Jennifer arrived at the kennel armed with a slip lead and the key to that isolation room. Diesel, the dog in question, reacted instantly. His lips curled back, revealing teeth, a growl rumbling deep in his chest. It was a clear warning, but one she misinterpreted as fear. When the kennel door opened, Diesel paused, seeming to calculate. This hesitation gave Jennifer the confidence to slip the lead around his neck and guide him to the evaluation room. Once inside, she removed the lead, thinking freedom would relax him. The room was small, concrete, and bare except for a metal folding chair. For minutes, Diesel stood rigid, his eyes fixed on Jennifer. She sat, talking softly, unaware she was being assessed by a predator. The attack came when she stood and stepped toward him, hand extended in what she meant as a peaceful gesture. To Diesel, it was a threat. His 75 pounds launched across the room, jaws aimed with deadly precision at her throat. Her scream was cut short as his teeth sank into her neck, severing major blood vessels. His jaws locked, his grip unbreakable. The dog's powerful neck muscles shook her violently, tearing through tissue and bone. Blood sprayed the walls. Other volunteers heard the scream and rushed to help, but the door was locked. By the time they got inside, Jennifer lay motionless in a pool of blood. Diesel stood over her, muzzle stained red, eyes burning with aggression. Paramedics arrived, but it was too late. Jennifer was pronounced dead at the scene. Diesel was immediately sedated and euthanized. The investigation revealed she had violated multiple safety protocols, ignored warning signs, and put herself in situations even experienced professionals would have avoided. The shelter implemented new security measures, and Jennifer's death became a cautionary tale in veterinary schools. Her family established a scholarship in her name, requesting it go to students studying wildlife conservation, a final acknowledgement that some animals remain dangerous no matter how much love they're shown. It was April 17, 2018. The humid Florida air hung heavy over Sunshine Primate Sanctuary, a controversial facility that claimed to rescue primates, but seemed more interested in exploiting them for tourist photos. The 20-acre property housed over 30 primates in substandard conditions, generating revenue through photo sessions that legitimate sanctuaries would never allow. Gorillas, chimpanzees, and other primates paced restlessly behind inadequate barriers under the afternoon sun. Jessica Rodriguez, a 31-year-old veterinary technician from Tampa, visited the facility with her husband, Carlos, believing it was a legitimate conservation effort. Jessica had always been passionate about animal welfare. She had dedicated her career to it, earning her veterinary technology degree through years of hard work and sacrifice. Her passion for primate conservation had led her to volunteer at legitimate sanctuaries and support organizations working to protect great apes in the wild. She genuinely believed her visit to Sunshine Primate Sanctuary would help promote conservation through the photos she planned to take. That afternoon, Jessica participated in what the facility called an educational encounter with King, a 350-pound silverback gorilla acquired from a defunct research facility. The sanctuary's safety measures were minimal: a chain-link barrier separating visitors from the gorilla's enclosure, with no additional protection or supervision from qualified staff. Silverback gorillas are among the most powerful primates on Earth. Adult males can weigh up to 400 pounds and possess the strength of 10 grown men. They are intelligent and emotionally complex, but also territorial and aggressive when they perceive threats. A gorilla's calm demeanor can be deceiving. It might appear as friendliness, but it could very well be the calculated patience of a territorial animal, carefully assessing potential threats. I've read accounts where that misinterpretation led to tragedy. I remember one case in particular, involving a woman named Jessica at the Sunshine Primate Sanctuary. She approached King, a 350-pound silverback, wanting to capture images that would convey his intelligence. She saw him sitting calmly, observing visitors with what seemed like curiosity. Driven by her conservation advocacy, Jessica made a fatal decision. She reached through the fence, believing physical contact would create a more powerful image. The moment her hand crossed the barrier, King reacted. He grabbed her arm with incredible force, pulling her against the chain link. The scream of shock and pain, they say, echoed through the facility. Others tried to help, but the gorilla's strength was overwhelming. One hand crushed her arm, while the other reached through to grab her head and shoulders, pulling her even harder against the fencing. Driven by territorial instincts, King continued his assault, inflicting devastating trauma. Jessica's attempts to break free only seemed to escalate his aggression. Tragically, within minutes, the struggle ceased. King maintained his grip on her lifeless form, displaying threatening behavior towards anyone who approached. By the time emergency responders arrived, it was too late. The investigation that followed revealed the sanctuary was operating illegally, exploiting animals and visitors with inadequate safety measures. It was shut down, and King was transferred to an accredited facility, one with proper containment and enrichment. Jessica's death led to enhanced regulations and stricter enforcement of wildlife protection laws. Maria, realizing the danger, began backing away slowly. But the 3 dogs she was walking became agitated and started barking aggressively at the bears. The mother bear's protective instincts kicked in. She rose to her full height, vocalizing aggressively, positioning herself between the dogs and her offspring. Maria tried to control the dogs and retreat, but their barking only escalated the situation. The 300-pound mother bear charged, covering the 30 yards between them in seconds. Maria, tangled in the leashes, fell hard onto the asphalt. The dogs scattered, leaving Maria vulnerable. The bear's paws struck Maria's back and shoulders with bone-crushing force, driving her face into the pavement. The bear's jaws clamped down on Maria's head and neck, teeth puncturing her skull and severing vital arteries. The bear's claws raked across Maria's torso and limbs, opening deep gashes. The attack was methodical, driven by maternal instincts. Nearby residents heard the commotion and called 911, attempting to scare the bear away. The mother bear eventually retreated with her cubs towards the forest, leaving Maria motionless. Paramedics arrived but couldn't save her. She had died from massive head and neck trauma. The investigation revealed that improperly secured garbage had attracted the bear, creating the conditions for the fatal encounter. Wildlife officials determined the bear acted defensively, protecting her offspring. The bear and cubs were relocated to a remote mountain area. Maria's death prompted changes to waste management protocols, including bear-proof garbage containers, an early warning system for wildlife sightings, and the removal of attractants from properties. Then there was Rebecca Martinez on October 15, 2016. The Georgia sun was setting over her 10-acre property, casting long shadows across a maze of makeshift kennels. The constant barking of 40 rescue dogs echoed across the land. At 34, Rebecca had spent 8 years building her unofficial sanctuary, taking in dogs that other shelters wouldn't touch. The aggressive ones, the biters, the animals marked for euthanization. Her recent divorce had left her financially strained and emotionally isolated, with only her dogs for company on the remote property. Neighbors had grown used to the noise, though some whispered concerns about the woman who seemed to care more about dangerous animals than her own safety. She rarely left the property anymore, moving between encloses with hands scarred from countless bites. Friends noticed the changes in Rebecca. She'd grown thinner, more withdrawn, speaking more about her dogs than anything else. Her ex-husband had tried to warn her about the dangers, but she dismissed his concerns. The local veterinarian had stopped making house calls after one of the dogs had lunged at him through a fence gap. Even the feed delivery drivers left supplies at the gate. The main enclosure housed her 3 largest rescues: Rex, a 90-pound pit bull mix with a history of abuse; Titan, an 85-pound Rottweiler cross; and Scar, a 75-pound mixed breed. What Rebecca didn't realize was that these 3 had been forming an alliance, establishing a hierarchy that put them at odds with anyone who came between them and food. The warning signs were there for anyone trained to recognize them. The 3 dogs had begun sleeping closer together, sharing food bowls, and displaying coordinated territorial behavior when other dogs approached. They'd started following Rebecca's movements more intently during feeding times, their body language shifting from grateful anticipation to something more predatory. But Rebecca, exhausted from managing 40 animals alone and emotionally invested in seeing progress. I've always been drawn to stories where the natural world clashes with our own carefully constructed routines. The stillness of a forest, the way it holds its breath before something breaks the silence forever. That always stays with me. In April of 2017, at the Thor Zoo Safari Park in France, the wolf sector, meant to echo the wildness of Yellowstone, seemed perfectly calm. But within the shadows of the pines, something was stirring, waiting to shatter that quiet. Camille Morel, a 29-year-old fitness instructor, was a creature of habit. After months of relentless classes, she'd decided to spend a weekend at the Thor Zoo Safari, seeking a wilderness escape close to Paris. She'd visited before, drawn to the tranquility of waking to animal sounds. This time, she booked a chalet not just for rest, but to maintain her running routine. The park's trails were well marked, and she felt safe, familiar with the grounds. Her chalet overlooked the fenced wolf sector, a layout designed for safety. She trusted the system. That morning, her goal was simple: a 2-mile jog before breakfast, just like at home. The zoo was a strange mix of natural calm and controlled wilderness. Pine trees, sandy trails, an artificial stream. At dawn, the service road and inner track looked almost identical, a known issue in drive-through parks. Beyond the chalet stretched a gravel service road used by rangers. The wolves' territory covered nearly 20 acres of woods. Grey wolves, the largest of the Sanids, can weigh over 100 pounds and reach speeds of 35 miles per hour. Pack behavior centers on cooperation, and attacks on humans usually happen when they feel threatened or see unusual movement. But in captivity, Stress can alter those instincts. That morning, a maintenance check was delayed. Workers had opened an internal service gate near the chalet to move a vehicle. Frost had iced the latch, preventing the double lock from fully engaging. Distracted by a mechanical issue, one worker left the gate under maintenance override without confirming it was secure. The interlock, meant to be re-engaged, was forgotten. Around 7 a.m., Camille stepped out with her phone and water bottle, jogging down the gravel path bordering the guest area, seeing no posted warnings. I still remember the chilling details of the Thori Zoo safari incident. A woman named Camille, jogging one morning, unknowingly crossed into the wolf enclos. The wolves, restless after a cold night, were quick to notice. What followed was a nightmare. She likely thought the path looped safely back, but by 7:20 a.m. she was nearly half a mile in, flanked by pines and brush, and alarmingly close to the wolves. A zookeeper in an observation tower spotted her and radioed for confirmation, but the words were barely out when the situation turned dire. At first, the wolves simply emerged from the trees, their posture low, tails stiff. Camille, perhaps used to seeing them behind fences, didn't immediately panic. But when they began to advance in a slow arc, she froze. She turned, saw the empty road behind her, and began to run. The wolves matched her pace, then accelerated. She glanced back once, a fatal mistake. Near a drainage trench, she tripped on the gravel and fell. Before she could get up, the lead wolf clamped down on her thigh. Another lunged at her shoulder. Her scream, I read in the report, carried across the enclos. The zookeeper sounded the alarm, but the response was delayed. Within minutes, more wolves joined, surrounding her. The lead wolf released its grip, only to sink its teeth into her hip. She thrashed, trying to push herself forward, but one of the animals bit into her arm, shaking until it tore free. She was on her back, the pack pulling from opposite sides. She kicked weakly, then went still. Rangers arrived in a vehicle, finding the wolves clustered over her body. Warning shots scattered them into the trees. Camille lay on her side, clothing torn, deep bites covering her body. There was no pulse. An autopsy confirmed death by massive blood loss and crushing trauma. The family filed a lawsuit alleging gross negligence, and the court ruled in their favour. The park settled quietly. The incident led to a criminal negligence inquiry and procedural retrofits, including alarms that trigger if any gate remains unlatched for too long. All of this because of a simple morning run gone horribly wrong. Then there's the story of Ashley Martinez, a 23-year-old college student from Dallas. It was July 22nd, 2016, a scorching day in Oklahoma. Ashley, along with her boyfriend Jake, was visiting the Wild Art Big Hat Sanctuary, a private facility housing over 20 rescued lions, tigers, and other exotic cats. Ashley, always seeking unique photo opportunities, had discovered the sanctuary through social media. The sanctuary operated in a legal grey area, offering interactions that legitimate zoos would never permit. I remember reading about African lions and how they are apex predators, retaining all their wild instincts regardless of human contact. Adult males can weigh up to 420 pounds and possess incredible strength, speed, and territorial behaviours. Lions view humans as either threats or prey. Their powerful jaws can deliver bite forces exceeding 650 pounds per square inch, and their razor-sharp claws can inflict fatal wounds. I've seen the ultimate price of a selfie. Ashley sought that perfect shot, a close-up with a 400-pound African lion named Caesar. She whispered her plan to her friend Jake. Distract the sanctuary owner, climb over the barrier, and get the picture. What followed was a stark reminder that some boundaries exist for a reason. Ashley quietly approached Caesar's enclos, a 4-foot chain-link fence her only obstacle. The lion, resting about 10 feet away, tracked her movement with golden eyes, showing no immediate aggression. She crouched down, phone in hand, ready to capture the moment. But as she moved closer, Caesar's demeanor shifted. His ears flattened, his tail twitched with increasing speed. Then, with explosive suddenness, it happened. Caesar's predatory instincts, triggered by Ashley's movement, unleashed millions of years of evolutionary programming. He recognized her as prey within his territory. In a single, powerful bound, the 400-pound lion launched himself at her. Ashley's phone flew from her hand as Caesar's massive paws struck her chest. She fell backward onto the dusty ground, the lion's razor-sharp claws tearing into her torso and shoulders. His powerful jaws clamped down on her neck, 4-inch canine teeth puncturing through muscle and vertebrae. Caesar's territorial instincts drove him to continue the assault, his claws raking across Ashley's body, his crushing bite maintaining its grip on her throat. Jake's screams brought the sanctuary owner running, but Caesar's aggressive posture over his kill made immediate intervention too dangerous. Within minutes, Ashley's movements ceased. The attack was fatal. Emergency responders arrived within 30 minutes, but it was too late. The investigation revealed that the facility had been operating without proper permits and insurance, violating numerous safety regulations. Caesar was relocated to an accredited sanctuary. Ashley's death devastated her family, prompting her university to implement enhanced safety education for students traveling during breaks. The incident led to stricter regulations for private exotic animal facilities and enhanced enforcement of existing safety laws. Now, let me tell you about something else. It was May 21st, 2018, in Grand Paradiso National Park, northern Italy. A small expedition of 4 had finished dinner beside a dying fire, leaving one storage bag unsealed near the cooking area. Giovanni Russo, 38, had worked these slopes for over a decade. A certified alpine guide, he and his wife, Eleanor, led small trekking tours for tourists seeking an authentic mountain experience. Giovanni was known for being practical and even-keeled, someone who knew when to turn back and when to press on. He'd grown up in Aosta, spending most of his life navigating the same valleys where his father once herded sheep. The Grand Paradiso region had become a renewed focal point for conservation. Wolves had returned after decades of absence, a fact Giovanni respected but didn't fear. He saw himself as part of that balance between humans and wildlife. The couple's guiding company specialized in remote routes with minimal disturbance, and Giovanni often told clients that predators avoided people. The trek that weekend was routine, a mild ascent, and one night at a designated campsite near the meadow of Almany. His clients, a pair of mid-aged hikers from Milan, had little experience in backcountry settings, but trusted the couple completely. That night, one of them had left a pack of trail mix open near the fire pit, and scraps from dinner were tossed into the same area. Wolves in this region averaged between 60 and 70 pounds, with lean grey coats blending into the forest. Normally nocturnal, they hunted red deer and chamois in coordinated packs. But in recent years, rangers had observed Boulder juveniles venturing closer to human camps, especially when food waste was left accessible. I can picture the scene so vividly, even though I wasn't there. The vast mangrove delta stretched endlessly before them, a maze of tidal channels and dense vegetation where the Ganges River meets the Bay of Bengal. Ancient mangrove trees rose from the brackish water, their aerial roots creating an impenetrable network. This UNESCO World Heritage Site harbored one of the world's most dangerous ecosystems, where saltwater crocodiles lurked beneath the surface and venomous snakes coiled in the canopy above. Genevieve Lawson, a 42-year-old real estate agent from London, had insisted on booking the most expensive boat tour package available. She was known for her demanding personality and unwillingness to accept limitations. She'd already berated their local guide, Ravi, multiple times during the morning briefing. Her husband, David, a 45-year-old investment banker, tried unsuccessfully to moderate her increasingly aggressive behavior. Their teenage children, Emma and Jake, watched uncomfortably as their mother dismissed every safety warning as unnecessary fear-mongering designed to limit their premium experience. Ravi, despite his 15 years of guiding experience in these treacherous waters, found himself intimidated by Genevieve's constant threats of negative reviews and demands for closer wildlife encounters. The motorboat had been equipped with safety barriers specifically to keep tourists safe from the apex predators that ruled this ancient domain. But Genevieve viewed these precautions as obstacles preventing her from capturing the authentic jungle photographs she demanded. The Sundarban's mangroves serve as the exclusive hunting ground for the world's largest population of Bengal tigers, apex predators that have adapted uniquely to this aquatic environment. Unlike their mainland cousins, these tigers are exceptional swimmers and have developed an unusual willingness to hunt humans in water. Weighing up to 400 pounds and measuring over 10 feet in length, these magnificent cats possess 4-inch canine teeth, capable of crushing windpipes and delivering fatal wounds within seconds. Their distinctive orange coat with black stripes provides perfect camouflage among the dappled shadows of the mangrove forest, making them virtually invisible as they move silently through the water. During the afternoon tour, their boat approached a narrow channel, where Ravi spotted fresh tiger tracks along the muddy shoreline. He immediately cut the engine and whispered for complete silence, explaining that a large male tiger had recently passed through the area. Despite his urgent warnings about remaining in the boat, Genevieve became frustrated with the distance and declared she needed closer photographs. Against all protests from her family and guide, Genevieve stepped over the safety barrier and lowered herself into the chest-deep channel water. The murky tidal water concealed her movements as she waded toward the mangrove shoreline, camera held high above her head. Unknown to the group, A massive 400-pound male Bengal tiger had been resting in the dense vegetation upstream and had detected their boat's engine minutes earlier. Sundarban tigers are ambush predators that use water as their primary hunting medium, approaching prey with complete silence while swimming. This particular male had successfully killed humans before and recognized the splashing sounds of vulnerable prey entering his territory. The tiger slipped into the water upstream and began swimming toward Genevieve, with only its eyes and nose visible above the surface. When Genevieve reached the muddy shoreline and began photographing tiger tracks, she remained completely unaware of the approaching predator. The tiger closed the final 20 feet underwater, using its powerful limbs to propel itself through the murky channel with deadly precision. The attack erupted from the water with explosive violence. The massive tiger surfaced directly behind Genevieve and immediately clamped its powerful jaws around her throat from behind. The 4-inch canine teeth punctured through her neck muscles and crushed her windpipe with over 1,000 pounds of bite force. The tiger's signature killing technique involved suffocating prey by crushing the throat, and the massive press collapsed her airway instantly. Genevieve's body went rigid as the tiger's teeth severed major blood vessels in her neck, causing massive internal bleeding. The predator's powerful forelimbs wrapped around her torso while its hind legs found purchase on her lower body, holding her in an inescapable grip. The tiger then began its drowning technique, pulling her backward into deeper water while maintaining its cruel grip. There's a silence that descends when a predator succeeds, a stillness that speaks of finality. Genevieve's struggles ceased quickly, the tiger holding her underwater until blood loss and oxygen deprivation took her. Then, the tiger simply disappeared back into the mangrove. It was November 15th, 2016, in the forests of eastern Russia. Snow fell, muting the sounds, the radio of a man named Nikolai Baronov falling silent. He was 52, a forestry worker who spent his life in those woods, monitoring traps and poaching activity near the Cody Allen Mountains. He lived alone, his life built around the forest's rhythms. That week, he was surveying a hunting reserve, following reports of wolves getting closer to villages. He rode out on his snowmobile before dawn, with bread, tea, an axe, and flares. His colleagues said he preferred working alone, claiming a second engine scared off wildlife. His assignment that day was simple: document animal tracks after the first full snow. Wolves had been increasingly active, driven from higher ground after a collapse in the wild boar population. I've read that wolves there could travel up to 20 miles in a single night, driven by hunger. Their diets shifted with the season: deer in autumn, carrion, or smaller mammals. In the hard winter months, when prey vanished beneath ice or snow, instinct sometimes blurred into desperation. Even a human scent, faint and unfamiliar, might trigger the ancient reflex to follow, test, and close the distance. Locals warned of animals following sled trails at dusk. Nikolai heard the same warnings that morning, but didn't take them seriously. He checked his flare gun, but left his rifle behind, citing its weight. By noon, the weather had shifted, gusting snow and dropping visibility. His supervisor made several radio attempts that went unanswered, assuming battery failure from the cold. When evening came and Nikolai still hadn't returned, Yevgen, a neighboring ranger, and longtime friend, prepared to follow his route. Evgeny rode out around 5 p.m. with a flashlight and a sidearm. The tracks were faint but visible, a single snowmobile line winding north, then stopping abruptly about 800 meters from the ridge. The engine was half buried in snow, its headlights still faintly glowing. The tracks showed that Nikolai had dismounted, perhaps to clear ice. Around the site, another pattern emerged, paw marks, deep and overlapping, circling. The snow bore drag lines, evidence of pacing. Then the circle tightened. The scene unfolded as a sequence of struggle. Human footprints turned erratic, moving backward. There was a snapped branch at chest height and a torn glove 10 feet away. A smear of blood marked the snowmobile's side panel. 30 feet beyond, the snow showed clear impressions of multiple bodies pressing down, wolves and man. The wolves had likely approached silently, using the cover of snowfall and wind. Initial bites were to the legs, pulling him down. Blood spray against nearby birch bark indicated arterial injury within seconds. As the attack progressed, the evidence suggested coordinated movement. Bite patterns indicated coordinated restraint from multiple angles. His jacket was shredded along the spine, showing where one animal had clamped onto his back, while another tore at the neck. Boot prints ended mid-stride, replaced by drag marks. Ivani followed them cautiously, revolver drawn. The forest was unnervingly still. He found the body 30 meters downhill near a frozen stream. The snow around it was flattened and red. The wolves had likely fed briefly before retreating. Later investigations showed that the surrounding prints showed at least 4 individuals, 2 larger adults, 2 smaller juveniles. Ivani radioed the base immediately. It took nearly an hour for a snow vehicle to arrive, by which time darkness had swallowed the clearing. The men lifted the body onto a tarp, careful not to disturb the bite patterns for analysis. The stench of blood lingered even in the cold. The pack didn't return, but distant howls echoed as the rescuers secured the area. Nikolai's remains were taken to Dalna for examination. The autopsy confirmed catastrophic blood loss with multiple punctures to major vessels and crushing trauma to the neck vertebrae, consistent with a fatal bite. Time of death was estimated shortly after the onset of the attack. The official report listed predatory behavior exacerbated by winter scarcity. Specialists noted that 2016 saw an unusual decline in prey density across the region. The incident received a single mention on regional news, framed as a tragic encounter during severe weather. There was no footage, only photographs from the recovery team that were never released publicly. It was June 14, 2015. And the Sunset Lake subdivision in suburban Tampa, Florida, was settling into another warm summer evening. The gated community, built around a series of interconnected retention ponds and decorative canals, had been marketed as a tropical paradise for retirees seeking the Florida lifestyle. Walter Walt Kowalski, a 67-year-old retired plumber from Ohio, was enjoying his 5th year in the Sunshine State from the comfort of his backyard patio, which overlooked one of the community's scenic waterways. Walt had moved. There are creatures alive today that have remained virtually unchanged for over 200 million years. I find that almost impossible to grasp. Perfectly adapted as ambush hunters, They can exert over 3,000 pounds of press per square inch with their jaws. These are the American alligators, apex predators of the Florida wetlands. And encounters with them don't always end well. I remember reading about a man named Walt, who had moved to Florida from Ohio, drawn by the promise of year-round golf and outdoor living. He bought a modest ranch home with water access, a private dock where he could fish and feed the ducks that became regular visitors. His evening routine involved sitting on his patio with a beer, watching the sunset reflect off the water, while tossing breadcrumbs to the waterfowl. The Sunset Lakes community where Walt lived had been built on reclaimed wetlands. Developers created retention ponds and canals to manage storm runoff and provide attractive water features. These waterways connected to natural creek systems that flowed into Tampa Bay, allowing wildlife to move freely. Recent heavy rains had raised water levels throughout the region, increasing wildlife activity in residential areas. Walt had noticed more alligators, but like most Florida residents, he had learned to coexist with them. His regular duck feeding, however, had created a reliable food source, attracting waterfowl from all over. That evening, Walt was relaxing on his patio when he noticed his favorite fishing lure was tangled in the vegetation near his dock. He waded into the knee-deep water, using a long-handled net to free the lure. He'd done this many times over the past 5 years without incident, confident the shallow water was safe. But this time was different. The attack came from directly beneath him as he stood in the canal. A 12-foot male alligator, submerged motionless near the dock for over an hour, waiting for the ducks, exploded upward with devastating force. The reptile's jaws clamped down on Walt's right leg with bone-crushing power, fracturing his femur and severing major arteries. The alligator immediately initiated his signature death roll, spinning rapidly in the water while maintaining his grip. The violent rotation dislocated Walt's hip and pulled him fully into the canal, where the gator's natural advantages became overwhelming. The alligator dragged Walt toward the deeper center of the canal, where his superior swimming ability made escape impossible. Within minutes, Walt's movements ceased as drowning and massive blood loss overwhelmed him. Emergency responders arrived within 10 minutes of the call, but the alligator had already retreated to deeper water with Walt's body. Police and wildlife officers worked through the night to locate and capture the reptile, using specialized equipment to safely extract both the alligator and Walt's remains from the canal. The investigation revealed Walt's regular duck feeding had inadvertently attracted the large alligator, creating the dangerous situation. Walt's death prompted immediate changes to the community's water safety protocols, including installing warning signs around all retention ponds and canals. It was September 8, 2014. On that same day, far to the south, the vast wetlands of the Florida Everglades stretched endlessly under the blazing afternoon sun. Sawgrass prairies and cypress swamps teemed with some of America's most dangerous wildlife. The remote waterways near Tamiami Trail buzzed with airboat tours, carrying tourists deep into alligator territory, where massive reptiles basked on mudbanks and hunted in the dark water channels. Michael Chen, a 35-year-old software engineer from Seattle, was on his first visit to Florida. He was taking a cross-country road trip to celebrate a recent promotion. Michael had always been fascinated by technology and outdoor adventure, spending weekends hiking in the Pacific Northwest Mountains. His engineering background gave him confidence in analyzing risks, but his experience with dangerous wildlife was limited to bears and mountain lions that could be avoided through precautions. Michael had grown up in urban Seattle, developing his love of nature through weekend camping trips with his father and uncle. His methodical approach to problem solving had made him successful, but it had also given him perhaps too much confidence in his ability to assess and manage dangerous situations. He enjoyed taking photos of his travels to share with family and friends back home. That afternoon, Michael joined a small group airboat tour that promised close encounters with alligators and other Everglades wildlife. The tour guide, a weathered Floridian with decades of swamp experience, repeatedly warned passengers to remain seated and keep hands inside the boat at all times. I've always been fascinated by apex predators, their power and their patience. It's chilling to think that an alligator, perfectly adapted for ambushing prey in the water, can reach over 14 feet in length and weigh over 1,000 pounds. Their jaws can exert 3,000 pounds of press per square inch. That's enough force to know they view any movement near their territory as either a meal or a threat. I remember reading about a particularly tragic incident on an airboat tour. It had been going smoothly for about an hour when the guide pointed out a huge alligator basking on a mudbank, maybe 20 feet away. This alligator was enormous, easily 12 feet long and weighing over 800 pounds. It was utterly still in the afternoon heat, a true prehistoric sight. One of the passengers, a man named Michael, started taking pictures. He was excited to show his colleagues back home in Seattle. But his excitement got the better of him, and he leaned too far over the edge of the boat to get a better shot. That's when his phone slipped. Without even thinking, Michael lunged, reaching out over the side of the airboat to try and catch it before it fell into the dark water. The alligator had been watching the boat with a predator's patience, and Michael's sudden movement triggered its attack. The 800-pound reptile exploded from the mudbank with incredible speed. Its powerful tail propelled it through the water like a missile, aimed right at Michael. The alligator's massive jaws clamped down on Michael's outstretched arm with bone-crushing force. 3,000 pounds of bite press instantly shattered bones and severed arteries. Michael's scream of shock and pain echoed across the swamp as the reptile's momentum pulled him completely over the side of the airboat and into the murky water. The tour guide and the other passengers desperately grabbed at Michael's legs, trying to pull him back into the boat, while the alligator maintained its grip on his arm. The alligator immediately began its signature death roll, spinning rapidly in the water while maintaining its devastating grip. Michael's struggles grew weaker as the massive blood loss, crushing injuries, and drowning overwhelmed him. The alligator's grip never loosened as it continued the death roll with mechanical precision, each rotation causing more trauma and ensuring its prey couldn't escape. Within minutes, Michael's movement ceased as the alligator's brutal assault proved fatal. The massive reptile dragged his body into deeper water, where it disappeared beneath the surface with its kill. Emergency responders arrived within the hour, but Michael's body wasn't recovered until the next day, when wildlife officials located the alligator and retrieved the remains. The tour company immediately put up physical barriers around all passenger seating areas and made the safety briefings more thorough. Michael's death led his family to push for stricter safety regulations in the wildlife tourism industry. The incident became a cautionary tale about the dangers of ignoring safety warnings around apex predators and prioritizing photography over personal safety. I then recall another tragedy, this one unfolding on July 8, 2017. The Detroit summer heat shimmered off the abandoned lots as Maria Santos loaded her car with dog food and water. At 28, she'd spent 5 years walking dogs by day and feeding Detroit's feral population by night. Recently laid off, she'd been spending more time in dangerous neighborhoods, trying to help animals most people considered beyond saving. The economic collapse had hit Detroit hard, leaving entire neighborhoods abandoned and creating perfect breeding grounds for packs of wild dogs. These weren't lost pets. They were second and third generation feral animals that had never known human kindness, surviving by scavenging and defending territory with savage efficiency. Maria's regular route took her through 6 abandoned lots, each home to a different pack. She knew their hierarchies, feeding schedules, and individual personalities. But the newest group concerned her the most. 6 dogs led by a large German Shepherd mix she'd nicknamed Alpha, including several animals she didn't recognize. This pack was hungrier, more aggressive, and less predictable than the others. But Maria's compassion overruled her caution. These animals needed help, and she was the only one willing to provide it. As twilight settled over the abandoned neighborhood, Maria parked near the lot where Alpha's pack had made their home. The area was a wasteland of broken concrete and waist-high weeds, perfect cover for animals that had learned to hunt and hide. Maria had been feeding this pack for 3 weeks, always maintaining a safe distance. But tonight felt different. The dogs seemed more agitated, their movements more coordinated, their attention more focused on her than the food. What she didn't realize was that pack dynamics had shifted with the addition of 3 new dogs, animals that saw humans not as providers, but as competitors. Alpha emerged from the shadows first, his 80-pound frame moving with predatory grace. Behind him came the others, a scarred pit bull mix, 2 smaller dogs, and 3 newcomers whose breeds were impossible to determine. Their eyes reflected the dim streetlight like mirrors. Maria began distributing food as always, tossing handfuls of kibble in different directions to prevent fighting. But tonight, the strategy backfired. Instead of dispersing to eat, the dogs began to... I've seen what happens when the line between domesticated and wild blurs. I remember reading about Maria, a woman who regularly fed a pack of stray dogs in an abandoned neighborhood. She saw them as creatures in need, creatures she could help. But one day, stepping in to break up a fight between 2 of the smaller dogs, she triggered something primal in the pack leader, Alpha. He saw her not as a provider, but as competition. The attack was swift and brutal. Alpha, all 80 pounds of him, launched himself at her, and the others joined in. Their pack mentality, honed by generations of survival on the streets, overrode any memory of her kindness. It was no longer a group of pets. It was a coordinated hunting pack. Maria's screams went unheard in that desolate place. It took 3 days to capture the dogs, and they were euthanized soon after. Rehabilitation was deemed impossible, their wild nature too deeply ingrained. It makes me think of Kendra Sullivan, a wildlife photographer who arrived at the Namba Island Chimpanzee Sanctuary in Uganda on September 8, 2015. This sanctuary, a 100-acre forested island on Lake Victoria, was a refuge for orphaned and rescued chimpanzees, a place where they could live in social groups in a semi-natural environment. Kendra, known for her fearless approach, was there to document the rehabilitation work. Her friend, Amy Chen, a documentary filmmaker, accompanied her. But from the start, Dr. James Mukasa, the sanctuary's director, grew concerned. Kendra dismissed safety briefings and demanded access to restricted areas for better photographs. Peter Sally, a caretaker, repeatedly warned her about the unpredictable nature of these powerful animals. But she brushed off his concerns, believing her experience with domestic animals gave her an innate understanding of animal behavior that transcended species. The sanctuary housed 49 rescued chimpanzees, many traumatized by poaching or the illegal pet trade. Despite their rehabilitation, they retained all the instincts and physical capabilities of their wild counterparts. Chimpanzees are among the most powerful primates, possessing strength 5 times greater than an adult human. Adult males can weigh up to 150 pounds and stand over 4 feet tall, with the ability to exert tremendous force. Their hands possess a grip strength exceeding 1,300 pounds per square inch, enough to crush bones with ease. And their canine teeth, over 2 inches long, are designed for both defense and establishing dominance. During the afternoon tour, Kendra grew frustrated with the viewing restrictions. She wanted access to the maintenance areas where staff entered the enclosure for cleaning and medical care. Dr. Sukasa repeatedly explained that these areas were strictly off-limits due to the extreme danger. But while the group was observing chimpanzees in a distant enclosure, Kendra noticed an unlocked gate leading to a maintenance corridor that provided direct access to the animal's living area. Despite explicit warnings, she slipped away from the group and entered the restricted zone, confident that her experience with domestic animals had prepared her for anything. The maintenance area brought Kendra within direct reach of Boso, the sanctuary's dominant male. He was a 150-pound adult who had been rescued as an infant 15 years earlier. Boso had shown aggressive tendencies toward unfamiliar humans and was considered one of the most dangerous animals at the facility. The powerful chimpanzee was resting near the barrier when he detected Kendra's presence. Chimpanzees are highly territorial animals that view unfamiliar humans as potential threats. Boso immediately became agitated by Kendra's intrusion into what he considered his territory. When she approached the barrier and raised her camera to photograph him, Boso interpreted this action as a direct challenge to his dominance. The powerful primate's response was immediate and devastating. Boso lunged forward and grabbed Kendra's extended arm with crushing force. I've read stories that have stayed with me for years. Tales of survival and tragedy etched in the starkest detail. And some of the most haunting involve the brutal power of the animal kingdom unleashed. I remember reading about a chimpanzee named Boso, and the attack is something I still think about. Boso, with his immense strength, could generate 1,300 lb per square inch of force. During one encounter, that force immediately fractured the bones in a woman's forearm. He pulled her against a barrier, his instincts honed to inflict maximum damage by targeting faces, hands, and genitals. His canine teeth, over 2 inches long and razor-sharp, tore into her face and neck. His hands ripped at her clothing as his feet kicked violently. The attack lasted nearly 2 minutes. Boso bit and clawed at her face, neck, and upper body. His powerful jaws crushed facial bones, tearing away large sections of skin and muscle. The chimpanzee's sharp teeth severed major blood vessels in her neck, causing massive bleeding. Her attempts to defend herself were futile against his overwhelming strength. Her free hand was severely mutilated by his bites, with several fingers crushed. The coordinated nature of his attack prevented any possibility of escape. Someone heard the screams and rushed to the area with emergency equipment. Using high-press water hoses, he managed to drive Boso away after nearly 2 minutes. By then, the woman had suffered catastrophic injuries to her face, neck, hands, and arms. The massive blood loss from severed arteries, combined with shock from her traumatic injuries, proved fatal within minutes. She died from hypovolemic shock and facial trauma before emergency medical services could reach the remote island location. The investigations focused on security failures that allowed visitor access to restricted areas. Enhanced security measures were implemented. Then I recall another incident, this one on February 9th, 2014, near Langer, Saskatchewan. The morning light came slow through the northern boreal forest. For 2 men setting out that day, it seemed like another routine trip into familiar woods. But without warning, it would turn into something neither had imagined possible. David Lasky was 45, a part-time wildlife photographer who lived just outside Prince Albert with his wife and a teenage son. He'd spent years tracking animal behavior through remote cameras, learning to move silently and read patterns in snow. Photography was both his passion and side income. His real job was at a lumber supply store, but weekends were for the woods. His cousin Jeff, 42, often joined him on winter runs to retrieve SD cards from trail cams. They had grown up hunting and fishing together, though neither carried a firearm anymore. That weekend, after a light snowfall, late-season hunger had made local deer scarce, and David wanted to check a set of cameras he'd left by a frozen creek north of Waskew Lake. They'd heard distant howls before, never close, and David believed wolves avoided humans by instinct. The plan was simple: a 2-hour ride by snowmobile, a short hike to the cameras, and back before dusk. Wolves in the region were typically grey, thick-coated animals averaging about 90 lb. They moved in tight family groups of 4 to 8. Their strength lay in coordination, silent pursuit, strategic circling, and patience rather than outright speed. Under normal conditions, they avoided people entirely, focusing on deer and moose along the forest edges. The men dressed in insulated gear and carried only a single red flare for safety. By 9:30 a.m., they parked their snowmobile near the creek and began walking the last half mile through packed snow, their breath hanging in the still air. At first, everything was normal. They reached the first camera, brushed off the lens, and swapped the SD card. Around 10:15, as they crossed the creek, Jeff's boot slipped on a patch of crusted but solid ice from recent thaw-freeze cycles. David crouched to help him up, steadying his cousin by the arm. That was when both noticed faint movement among the tree line across the creek. The animals stood still at first, only their eyes catching light. Jeff straightened and waved his arms, shouting to scare them off. The wolves didn't run. Unbeknownst to the men, a freshly killed deer lay half buried in snow about 20 yards behind the tree line, a cached carcass the wolves had dragged there the night before. The pack was food-stressed, defending the cache rather than hunting. They began to fan out slowly, forming a loose semicircle. David muttered that they were just curious, that noise would drive them away. But even as he spoke, one of the wolves lowered its head and started advancing. The men began backing up the slope toward their snowmobile, moving quickly but without turning. The wolves followed, quiet and steady. Then the first lunge came, a grey blur across the ice, jaws clamping onto the back of David's leg. The impact drove him face first into the snow. Jeff spun and reached for the flare, but his gloves fumbled with the cap. 2 more wolves broke from the trees, bounding fast, their paws sending up bursts of white powder. David tried to kick free, leaving streaks of blood against the snow. He managed to roll onto his back and swing an arm, hitting one wolf across the muzzle with his camera bag. But another struck from the side, teeth finding his shoulder. Jeff finally snapped the flare to life, the red flame hissing. He swung it toward the animals. One wolf snarled and darted back, fur singed along its flank, but the others held ground. David was on his knees now, one hand pressed to his thigh, blood pumping dark and fast through his fingers. He tried to rise, but his leg gave out beneath him. Jeff charged forward with the flare, yelling, waving it more aggressively. The heat drove them back momentarily, circling just out of reach. David slumped sideways. I've spent years studying the intersection of wildlife and human spaces, but some cases still haunt me. The story of David, for example. He and his cousin Jeff were out in the wilderness when a pack of wolves attacked. Jeff managed to scare them off with a flare, but it was too late for David. Jeff tried to staunch the bleeding, but the wound was too deep, and David died within a minute. Jeff, shaken, used David's camera bag and his own phone to call for help. The reception was faint, but a signal reached a ranger station. Authorities arrived by snowmobile about 40 minutes later. They found Jeff sitting beside the body, shaking uncontrollably. Wolf tracks surrounded the site, leading back toward the tree line and a deer carcass. The official report listed the cause of death as blood loss from femoral artery trauma, consistent with large animal bites. Provincial conservation officers and federal wildlife agents closed the area within the hour. Samples were taken for DNA analysis, and the pack was later trapped and relocated to a remote management zone north of Reindeer Lake. Wildlife biologists believed the wolves were defending a food cache, not actively hunting. But that distinction offered little comfort. A few years later, on December 9th, 2018, a very different tragedy unfolded in Canyon Vista, a suburban community in Los Angeles. It was an unusually warm winter evening. The residential development was built where urban sprawl met the wild chaparral of the Santa Monica Mountains. Homes perched on steep slopes offered spectacular views of the city. Kevin Chen, a 16-year-old high school junior and varsity basketball player, was running late after practice. He decided to take his usual shortcut through an undeveloped lot, rather than follow the longer route along the main road. Kevin was an honor student and a star athlete, balancing academic excellence with athletic achievement. He lived with his parents and a younger sister in a modern home that backed up against the natural open space. He often used the informal trails and vacant lots to move quickly between his home and school, a practice that had never caused any problems during his 4 years in the neighborhood. The Canyon Vista area had been experiencing increased wildlife activity, following a series of devastating wildfires that had burned thousands of acres in the surrounding mountains. The fires had displaced numerous predators, forcing them to seek new territory and food sources in areas they had previously avoided. Local authorities had issued warnings about mountain lion sightings in residential areas, but most residents viewed these as routine precautions rather than serious threats. Kevin was aware of the wildlife warnings, but had never encountered any dangerous animals during his frequent use of the neighborhood's informal trail system. He carried his basketball gear in a backpack and typically moved quickly through the undeveloped areas, confident that his familiarity with the terrain and his athletic ability would keep him safe from any potential threats. Mountain lions are solitary predators that require large territories to support their hunting needs, with adult males controlling ranges of up to 100 square miles. Juvenile males are particularly dangerous as they establish new territories, often displaying more aggressive behavior than experienced adults. These young cats are less skilled at hunting natural prey and may target easier victims, including domestic animals and occasionally humans. Mountain lions are capable of incredible stealth and can stalk prey for extended periods before launching surprise attacks from close range. As Kevin jogged through the overgrown vacant lot, he was unaware that an 80-pound juvenile male mountain lion had been using the area as a hunting ground for domestic cats and small dogs that wandered from nearby homes. The young cat had been displaced from his natal territory by an older, more dominant male, and was desperately seeking to establish new hunting grounds that could support his survival. The mountain lion had been stalking Kevin for several hundred yards, moving silently through the dense brush while staying downwind to avoid detection. The cat's hunting instincts were triggered by Kevin's size, movement pattern, and the fact that he was alone and vulnerable in the predator's newly claimed territory. The attack came from behind as Kevin navigated through a particularly dense section of chaparral. The 80-pound mountain lion launched himself from the brush with explosive force, his powerful hind legs propelling him through the air to land squarely on Kevin's back. The impact drove Kevin face first into the rocky ground, while the cat's claws found purchase in his shoulders and back. The mountain lion's jaws clamped down on the back of Kevin's neck, his 4-inch canine teeth puncturing through muscle and vertebrae, his bite force targeting the spinal cord. Kevin's attempts to fight back with his backpack proved futile against the cat's superior strength and positioning. The mountain lion's razor-sharp claws raked across Kevin's shoulders and torso, each swipe opening deep gashes that caused massive blood loss. Kevin's screams for help echoed through the hillside community, alerting residents in nearby homes to the emergency unfolding in the vacant lot. Several homeowners called 911 while attempting to locate the source of the disturbance. But the dense vegetation made it difficult to pinpoint Kevin's exact location. The mountain lion continued his attack for several minutes, driven by predatory instincts and the stress of establishing new territory. Police and paramedics arrived within 10 minutes of the first 911 call, using Kevin's cries for help to locate him in the brush. I've always been drawn to those shadowed corners where the wild world brushes against our own. Places where the line blurs, and the consequences can be devastating. Consider the story of Kevin, a reminder of how easily we can stumble into tragedy when we encroach on nature's domain. He died after a mountain lion, displaced by wildfires, attacked him. But there are other stories too. Stories of arrogance and a dangerous dance with apex predators. It was November 3rd, 2015. Lonair Exotic Ranch, a sprawling 300-acre facility in East Texas, offered wealthy clients a chilling experience. Photo sessions with dangerous predators. It operated in the shadows, offering interactions legitimate zoos would never permit. Brandon Walsh, a 27-year-old personal trainer from Houston, had heard about the ranch through word of mouth. He was drawn to the extreme, seeking challenges that would test his limits. He saw this as the ultimate test of courage and confidence. He'd made a name for himself helping others overcome their fears, but perhaps his success had bred overconfidence. He paid the rancher's hefty fee for a private photo session with Sasha, a 300-pound female Bengal tiger raised from a cub. The ranch owner, a former circus trainer, supervised, repeatedly warning Brandon of the dangers. Bengal tigers are formidable, solitary creatures. Their jaws can deliver a bite force exceeding 1,000 LEBs per square inch, and their claws can grow up to 4 inches long. The session started safely, Brandon posing outside Sasha's enclosure. But he quickly grew frustrated, wanting a closer, more dramatic shot. He convinced the owner to let him into a smaller holding area, separated from Sasha only by a chain-link barrier. It was a fatal decision. Brandon crouched near the barrier, extending his hand towards Sasha, as if to assert dominance. The tiger's ears flattened, her tail twitched. The attack was swift. As Brandon shifted for another pose, Sasha's hunting instincts exploded. She launched herself at the barrier, her claws finding purchase on his arm. Her strength pulled him against the fence as her jaws snapped. The tiger's claws tore across his arm and shoulder, severing arteries. The owner intervened, distracting Sasha, but the damage was done. Brandon collapsed from shock and blood loss, his physical conditioning useless against such catastrophic injuries. I often find myself thinking about the line between our world and the wild. Sometimes that line is thinner than we imagine. Take the story of Brandon, a fitness model. He died because he posed with a tiger named Seisha at an unpermitted Texas ranch. Emergency responders arrived quickly, but it was too late. Massive trauma and blood loss. A tragedy born from the dangerous intersection of human ambition and untamed nature. The ranch, it turned out, was operating without proper permits or insurance, flouting state regulations meant to protect the public from dangerous animals. Sasha was moved to a proper sanctuary, and the facility was shut down. Brandon's death resonated, prompting calls for better safety education about using wild animals as props. His family, understandably, sued, arguing that the ranch's negligence led to his death. Then there's Tommy Rodriguez, August 19th, 2013. The Missouri heat was stifling, and the air around Tommy's property was thick with the stench of neglect. For over a decade, Tommy had been running puppy mills, but financial press had forced him to make cuts that would ultimately cost him his life. His 20-acre property was a warren of makeshift kennels in converted sheds, housing nearly 80 dogs in various states of breeding and neglect. He specialized in popular breeds, selling them at high prices to unsuspecting buyers. The real money, though, came from the security side of his operation. 4 massive dogs patrolled the perimeter. 2 cane corsos, each weighing over 120 pounds, and 2 Mastiff mixes tipping the scales at nearly 140 pounds. These weren't pets. They were weapons, trained to be aggressive. The financial press had been building for months. Veterinary bills, feed costs, facility maintenance. They had all eaten into Tommy's profits. Increased scrutiny from animal welfare organizations had forced him to be more careful. But he'd been cutting back on everything: food, medical care, even basic maintenance. The guard dogs, once fed premium meat, had been reduced to scraps and cheap kibble. Tommy didn't realize that hungry guard dogs are exponentially more dangerous than well-fed ones. Hunger sharpened their predatory instincts, made them more territorial, and reduced their tolerance for human presence. The dogs had been showing signs of increased aggression for weeks. They'd begun fighting among themselves over food, marking territory more aggressively, and showing less deference to Tommy's commands. A smart operator would have recognized the warning signs, but Tommy was desperate, distracted, and dangerously overconfident. On that sweltering August night, Tommy made his final rounds of the property, checking on breeding females and security systems. It was past midnight, and the Missouri countryside was silent except for distant barking and the hum of inadequate ventilation fans. He carried a flashlight and a metal rod, but his attention was focused on financial calculations rather than the danger lurking in the shadows. The guard dogs had been without food for 3 days, not by design, but because Tommy had been too busy dealing with a sick litter to maintain their feeding schedule. Their hunger had reached a critical point where survival instincts overrode years of conditioning. They were no longer guard dogs protecting property. They were predators looking for their next meal. Tommy's mistake was approaching the area where he kept the guard dogs without proper precautions. Normally, he would have fed them first, ensuring their compliance before entering their territory. But financial stress and exhaustion had made him careless, and he walked directly into their domain carrying nothing but a flashlight and false confidence. The attack began when Brutus, the larger cane corso, emerged from the shadows near the feeding area. His 125-pound frame moved with surprising silence, his massive head lowered in a hunting posture that Tommy should have recognized as a threat. Behind him came the others: Titan, the second cane corso; Rex, a 140-pound Mastiff mix; and Scar, whose scarred muzzle told the story of his fighting background. Tommy realized the danger too late. As he turned to retreat, Brutus launched himself forward, his powerful jaws clamping down on Tommy's left eye with crushing force. The impact drove Tommy to the ground, his flashlight spinning away into darkness as he screamed for help that would never come. The other 3 dogs joined the attack within seconds, their pack instincts fully engaged. Rex grabbed Tommy's right arm, his massive jaws crushing bone as he shook violently. Titan went for the torso, his teeth tearing through clothing and flesh with mechanical efficiency. Scar circled the attack, darting in to bite and retreat, his fighting experience evident in his tactical approach. Tommy's screams echoed across the empty countryside, but his nearest neighbor was over 2 miles away. The dogs worked with the coordination of experienced predators. Their attacks focused on disabling their prey rather than killing quickly. They had learned patience in their previous lives, and hunger had made them methodical in their violence. The assault continued for nearly 20 minutes, with the dogs taking turns feeding on Tommy while he was still alive. His struggles grew weaker as blood loss and shock took their toll, but the animals showed no mercy. They had been conditioned to view violence as normal, hunger as constant, and humans as either threats or food sources. I've seen what happens when desperation takes hold. It's a primal force that can turn even the most docile creatures into something unrecognizable. I saw it in the case of Tommy, the puppy mill operator. His body wasn't discovered for 3 weeks. By then, the guard dogs, driven mad by hunger, had consumed him. They were the very animals he had used to guard his illegal operation, the animals he'd exploited. What remained of Tommy was scattered near the feeding area. The other dogs, trapped in kennels, starved to death. The stench of death eventually led authorities to uncover the horrific scene. The deputies found dozens of dead and dying dogs. The surviving guard dogs were shot on sight due to their aggression. The investigation revealed the full extent of Tommy's cruelty. Breeding females in deplorable conditions, puppies dying from disease, and financial records showing he sold sick animals across state lines. The surviving dogs were euthanized. Tommy's death ended one of Missouri's largest puppy mills, but the cost was immense. Then there's the story of Roberto Mendez. It was August 22nd, 2014, a sweltering summer afternoon in the exclusive Cypress Point community, on the edge of the Florida Everglades. Cypress Point was luxury defined, built on reclaimed wetlands with artificial lakes and manicured landscapes. Roberto, a 35-year-old landscaper, took pride in maintaining these pristine grounds. He supported his wife and 2 young children through his business, often working long hours in the Florida heat. The development's decorative ponds connected to natural waterways, creating a pathway for wildlife. Roberto was familiar with Florida's creatures, respecting their potential danger. That afternoon, he was trimming bushes around a pond when his hedge trimmer slipped and fell into the water. American alligators are masters of ambush, remaining motionless for hours. Adult females can reach 10 feet in length and weigh up to 200 pounds, striking with incredible speed and power. Their bite force exceeds 2,000 pounds per square inch, and they use a death roll to disorient and drown prey. Roberto waded into the knee-deep water to retrieve his trimmer, assuming the pond was safe. He'd worked around similar ponds countless times, but the moment his feet touched the muddy bottom, a 10-foot female alligator exploded from the vegetation. Her jaws clamped down on Roberto's right leg with devastating force. The waters around Neptune Islands. They hosted some of the largest great white sharks on Earth, apex predators ruling those seas for over 400 million years. I find that thought so humbling, so terrifying. These magnificent hunters, they can reach lengths of over 20 feet and weights exceeding 4,000 pounds. Imagine that, with massive triangular heads housing rows of razor-sharp, serrated teeth. Each tooth measuring up to 3 inches in length, designed to slice through flesh and bone with devastating efficiency. Great whites possess the most powerful bite force of any living creature, capable of exerting over 4,000 pounds per square inch of crushing press. The crew, they had successfully attracted multiple great white sharks using a carefully prepared chum mixture. And among the responding predators was a massive 18-foot female, estimated to weigh over 4,000 pounds. She had been feeding aggressively on the bait. The enormous shark displayed classic hunting behaviors, circling the boat with calculated precision, all while investigating the steel diving cage. Before entering the water, Tara secretly loosened the connections on her diving regulator. She was planning to create a fake equipment malfunction, one that would justify exiting the protective cage. She believed she was clever enough to manipulate the situation to get the unrestricted shark access she felt entitled to. Once submerged in the protective cage, Tara immediately began signaling fake distress to the surface crew, pointing frantically at her sabotaged regulator. Captain Morrison initiated emergency procedures to bring her to the surface. But instead of ascending, Tara swam away from the cage toward the feeding sharks, believing her superior intelligence made her invulnerable. Her erratic swimming movements created the exact type of distressed prey behavior that triggers great white hunting instincts. The massive female great white detected Tara's panicked swimming immediately and abandoned the chum bait to investigate this new potential prey. The enormous predator approached from below at speeds exceeding 25 miles per hour. The shark's assault was swift and devastating. Rising from the depths like a living torpedo, the great white struck Tara from below with tremendous force, its massive jaws opening to reveal rows of gleaming, serrated teeth. The impact drove Tara upward as the shark's jaws clamped down around her torso with bone-crushing press. The razor-sharp teeth sliced through her wetsuit and deep into her chest and abdomen. The crushing bite force of 4,000 pounds per square inch shattered Tara's rib cage instantly, puncturing both lungs and severing major blood vessels throughout her torso. The shark's powerful jaw muscles continued applying press while its head thrashed violently from side to side. The signature feeding behavior that allows great whites to tear away large chunks of flesh. The violent shaking motion severed Tara's body at the waist, separating her upper and lower torso. I've seen firsthand how quickly nature can turn, how a lifetime of experience can be undone in a single, fatal misjudgment. I've read reports, autopsies, and investigations that haunt me still. It's a stark reminder that even with the best intentions, respect for the wild is paramount. Tara's story is a chilling example. Massive amounts of blood clouded the water as a shark consumed her. She died within seconds from blood loss, traumatic shock, and the destruction of vital organs. Her belief that money could override the behavior of a natural predator proved fatally wrong. The investigation revealed equipment sabotage and violation of safety protocols. While maritime authorities implemented stricter regulations for shark cage diving, Tara's family filed lawsuits, seemingly echoing the same sense of entitlement that led to her death. Then there's the case of Harold Thompson. It was March 22, 2015, in Alabama. The sun beat down as barking echoed from kennels scattered across his property. At 71, Hank moved slowly, carrying water with the confidence of 20 years of dog breeding. He and his wife, Martha, had built their operation from nothing, specializing in Rottweilers and German Shepherds. What started as a hobby had grown into a modest business. They had 8 breeding females and 3 males, selling litters across the southeast. But age had made Hank careless. In his younger days, he never would have entered a kennel alone, especially with breeding males during territorial phases. He knew what these dogs could do, the power in their jaws, the speed of their attacks. But experience had bred overconfidence. The centerpiece of their operation was Brutus, a 130-pound Rottweiler whose massive frame made him their most sought-after stud. At 4 years old, he was in his prime. His offspring commanded premium prices from buyers seeking protection animals. Recently, though, Brutus had been showing increased aggression. A minor injury to his left rear leg had left him limping and irritable. He even snapped at Martha when she tried to examine the wound. The veterinarian had prescribed pain medication, but the dog's temperament had grown increasingly unpredictable. Martha expressed concerns about Hank working alone with Brutus, especially given the dog's recent mood changes. But Hank dismissed her worries, convinced their bond was unbreakable. He'd raised Brutus from a puppy. On that March afternoon, Martha had driven into town for supplies, leaving Hank alone with the dogs. The kennels needed cleaning. Water bowls required filling. Work Hank had done thousands of times before. Brutus watched from his kennel as Hank approached, his dark eyes tracking every movement. The dog was panting heavily despite the shade. His injured leg seemed to cause him discomfort. Pain, as I've learned, has a way of making even docile animals unpredictable, and Brutus was far from docile. Hank unlocked the kennel gate and stepped inside, bucket in hand, his attention focused on the dirty water bowl. He'd performed this routine hundreds of times. But that day, Brutus was different. The dog's ears were pinned back, his tail held low, his massive body coiled with tension. As Hank bent down to clean the water bowl, his back turned to the dog, Brutus made his decision. There was no growling, no warning, just 130 pounds of muscle launching through the air with devastating force. The impact drove Hank face first into the concrete floor, his bucket clattering away as Brutus's jaws found their target. The dog's teeth sank deep into Hank's throat, crushing his windpipe and severing major blood vessels in a single catastrophic bite. Hank's hands clawed desperately at the animal's massive head, but Brutus had locked on with predatory determination. The dog's powerful neck muscles allowed him to shake violently, tearing through tissue and bone. Hank's screams were cut short by the damage to his throat, replaced by a wet gurgling sound. Blood pooled beneath his body as Brutus continued his attack, driven by instinct bred into his lineage for generations. The assault lasted less than 3 minutes, but the damage was irreversible. When Brutus finally released his grip, Hank lay motionless on the kennel floor, his life ebbing away in the Alabama heat. Martha returned home 2 hours later to find the property strangely quiet. She called out for Hank as she walked toward the kennels, but received no response. When she rounded the corner and saw Brutus standing guard over her husband's body, the full horror became clear. The dog's reaction to Martha's presence was immediate and threatening. He positioned himself between her and Hank's body, his lips pulled back in a snarl. Martha backed away slowly, dialing 911 from her truck. Sheriff's deputies arrived within 20 minutes, but Brutus refused to allow anyone near Hank's body. After consulting with animal control, the decision was made to shoot Brutus rather than risk additional casualties. The massive Rottweiler died with 3 bullets in his chest. The investigation concluded that Hank's death was a tragic accident caused by his failure to recognize warning signs of an aggressive, injured animal. The breeding operation was shut down, the remaining dogs relocated, and Martha was left to grieve both her husband and the animal that had been part of their family. I remember reading about Sarah Miller too. It was September 3rd, 2016, near the Toklat River in Denali National Park, Alaska. By early afternoon, the wind had dropped and the landscape stood still, open and silent. From a distance, it looked calm, a place where nothing could happen quickly. But the quiet there was deceptive. Sarah Miller, 26, was an experienced backpacker from Anchorage. I find myself often pondering the blurred line between respect and fear when we venture into the wild. Sarah, a seasoned hiker, understood this tension intimately. She embarked on a 2-day loop near the Tlat River in Denali, Alaska, her journey timed to coincide with the caribou migration. It was a route where wolves were often seen trailing the herds. She was prepared, carrying bear spray, a GPS beacon, and enough food for 2 nights. Solo travel didn't intimidate her. She'd been doing it for years, documenting her routes for small hiking blogs. She'd properly filed the required permits for the Denali backcountry zones. Rangers later recalled she had asked about late-season wolf movements, seemingly unconcerned by reports of increased sightings near the river corridor. Wolves, averaging between 70 and 100 pounds, were following caribou herds migrating south. Fresh tracks had been spotted just days before. These creatures, built for endurance and speed, capable of covering 40 miles in a day, possess a bite force strong enough to crush bone. Yet, they rarely approached people, typically subsisting on caribou, hares, and ground squirrels. However, when prey grew scarce or human scent carried traces of food, curiosity sometimes lingered. That week, rangers had posted advisories near trailheads, noting that several hikers reported wolves trailing them at a distance. Sarah had likely seen these postings when she signed out, though no record showed she changed her route. She was confident in her precautions. Statistically, Denali's wolves avoided confrontation. Around 4 p.m., a passing tourist group spotted a lone figure standing on a gravel bar below the ridge. It was Sarah, waving before continuing upstream toward her camp. She reached her final GPS coordinate sometime before 4:45 p.m. The last photos on her recovered camera showed wide shots of the river valley and a small group of wolves following a caribou herd in the mid-distance. Tracks later indicated she moved off the main gravel bar toward higher ground, likely planning to cut inland. About half a mile from her tent, the first sign of struggle appeared. Her GPS unit recorded erratic movement, rapid looping, then a sudden stop. Investigators reconstructed the events through physical evidence and predator behavior analysis. The wolves had diverted toward her positions once the herd passed out of sight. Sarah likely saw them at a distance and deployed her bear spray once. Residue was detected on nearby vegetation. Wind readings that afternoon showed a westward shift, causing partial blowback of the spray mist. It worked briefly, driving the wolves about 20 feet back before the cloud dispersed. They began to circle again, emboldened by the fading chemical scent. One flank of the group approached from behind, following her retreat up a shallow embankment. Handprints pressed deep into the soil showed she climbed in haste. Blood marks began at the top of the slope. One wolf had likely lunged first, grabbing her backpack or arm. The straps were torn clean through, consistent with a pulling force rather than a cut. A second wolf joined, aiming lower, its bite breaking the skin along her thigh. She tried to fight back. The spray canister lay spent beside her pack, but the group coordinated, one attacking from the rear, the others darting forward. The ground at the site was churned with soil and hair, suggesting several minutes of movement before she was forced down. Analysis of tissue marks later revealed crushing bites to the neck and shoulder, consistent with a killing grip, the kind wolves used to suffocate large prey. Her jacket was shredded, and the torn sleeve, recovered 20 feet away, still held fragments of skin and fabric. Search efforts began that night, with both ground crews and a helicopter dispatched after rangers noted her vehicle unmoved. The aircraft spotted a disturbed patch of gravel near the Tlate Channel the next morning. Sarah's body lay partially covered by soil and debris, her left arm missing, likely carried off by scavengers after the attack. They collected the camera and other items for analysis and later confirmed through timestamps that her final photograph was taken just 6 minutes before the estimated time of death. The park temporarily closed multiple backcountry zones along the migration corridor. Genetic sampling confirmed the wolves belonged to the Talat pack. Investigators determined the attack began as a predatory test or prey proxy response that escalated fatally, but with no repeated approach or food-seeking behavior observed, no removals were ordered. At a private debrief, rangers explained the findings to Sarah's parents, who later issued a short statement urging that the park not punish what it protects. It was April 14th, 2018, when Monica Barrett arrived at Everglades National Park in Florida, one of the largest tropical wilderness areas in the United States. The vast wetland ecosystem stretched across 1.5 million acres of sawgrass marshes and shallow waterways, home to some of North America's most dangerous predators. The park's intricate network of channels created the perfect habitat for massive American alligators. Monica Barrett, a 44-year-old divorce attorney from Miami, had booked a solo kayak tour to clear her head after a difficult custody case. Known for her aggressive courtroom tactics and confrontational personality, she had built her legal career on intimidating opponents and refusing to back down from any challenge. Her reputation for getting her way through sheer force of will had created a dangerous sense of entitlement. Tommy Rodriguez, a 52-year-old tour guide with over 20 years of experience, immediately recognized Monica as a problematic client during the morning safety briefing. She had interrupted his presentation. "I've seen park rangers post warning signs, but sometimes those warnings are ignored, with devastating consequences. I remember reading about a woman named Monica who visited a park during alligator nesting season. Despite repeated warnings about aggressive males protecting their territory, she dismissed them, even threatening legal action against a tour guide who tried to enforce safety protocols. She paddled her kayak into a restricted lagoon, clearly marked with signs. It was a primary nesting area for a massive bull alligator, a 12-foot, 800-pound reptile that had been actively defending his territory for weeks. The alligator detected her paddle strokes almost immediately. It had been resting motionless beneath the surface, perfectly camouflaged. The attack was swift. The alligator launched itself from the water, its jaws clamping down on her kayak, capsizing it and throwing her into the murky water. It then locked onto her torso, its razor-sharp teeth puncturing her life jacket, her chest, and abdomen. The alligator then began its signature death roll, a violent spinning motion meant to disorient prey and cause massive internal trauma. The reptile rotated rapidly, spinning Monica's body while maintaining its crushing grip. The death roll continued for over a minute. The violent motion filled her punctured lungs with water, and the crushing press prevented her from breathing. The combination of trauma, drowning, and blood loss proved fatal within minutes. Rescue teams couldn't reach the remote lagoon in time. It reminds me of another incident, this one on May 14, 2017, in Great Smoky Mountains National Park. The ancient mountains rose majestically, shrouded in mist. Sarah Johnson, a 29-year-old nurse from Atlanta, was hiking with her fiancé, Tom, celebrating their engagement. Sarah loved photography and always carried her camera to capture memories. She'd been hiking throughout the Southeast for over 5 years, building her wilderness skills. These mountain getaways were a welcome escape from her demanding job at a busy trauma center. They were hiking through a remote alpine meadow when they saw 2 black bear cubs playing in the tall grass, their mother nowhere in sight. Sarah knew this was a rare photo opportunity. Black bears are, I know, North America's most common bear species. But I also know that a mother bear with cubs The protective mother remained near Sarah's body for several more minutes, ensuring the threat was neutralized before gathering her cubs and disappearing into the dense forest. Park rangers arrived over an hour later in response to Tom's emergency call, but Sarah was already dead from massive trauma. The bear family was tracked but left undisturbed, as wildlife officials determined the mother had been acting within normal protective behavioral patterns when defending her young. Sarah's death devastated the hiking community and prompted enhanced educational programs about wildlife safety and proper distance protocols. Her family established a foundation promoting wilderness safety education, ensuring her passion for conservation would continue through enhanced protection for both wildlife and outdoor enthusiasts.